Good morning and welcome back to the sort of the Mokulito and cloth hybrid print which I'm about to start making. You obviously know I've done all this bit, that's cutting up the jigsaw plates of the Mokulito, the old Mokulito plate, sewn some of the cloth together, got all my bits. I'm just going to kind of run through on the camera, and bear with this is going to be another film which obviously I'm doing, well not live, but I'm doing unedited, so you can see how this works as a professional printmaker and see sort of how I'm learning as well. So there is a broad plan, but obviously with room flexibility. I've got all my inks just slightly off shot, kind of at the back of the camera here. Palette knives ready. I've got an inking station just over here which is sort of just underneath the camera actually, where I'm going to be inking up, where I'm going to be rolling out my ink. The press is set up. We're printing on some Fabriano paper. This is actually an old piece. You can see it's got sort of marks on the back. Because this is for explorative purposes. It's just a piece from the plan chest. The press is set up for the pressure of the cloth. I'm going to debate and see how I feel about resetting it for the depth of the plywood, because in theory what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to hand print the Mokulito plates when I come to it and use the press only for the cloth. So that's why that is set up just for the cloth at the moment. But it is easy enough if I reset the pressure. This film's going to be split up into 3. So I will find a suitable break, pause the film and then restart filming. That's just for your viewing, so you don't get too bored. The process I'm doing is going to be a continual stream. There will be I'm not stopping, so to speak. Now this does require a little bit of pre-thought and pre-planning. The theory being is I have my sort of textured cloth bit, and I'm basically going to make a scene of apples, which is very bountiful at this time of the year, with some of these inset in amongst the cloth. I mean, you get the idea as if they're sitting in there. Now if one is to do that, for instance this apple here, you want in the print itself, you want the apple to be at the back. You want the cloth, this piece of fabric, to be sitting on top of the apple. So therefore, we don't want to print all of this apple. In fact, we don't want to print the section that is underneath the cloth, because we want the cloth to sit on top of it. So therefore, I am going to just have a quick play and talk as I go, and use just scraps of tissue paper and a pair of scissors, which I shall get out now. A pair of scissors to cut out masks, so when I print certain things, parts of the apple are not printed, knowing that I'm going to be laying other things on top. The same applies, for instance, if I have this apple here and I'm wanting to print a group of 3 like that, for instance, I want this apple to not necessarily have this cloth lithographic apple behind it. I want this area not to print. So I'd get a piece of tissue paper and I'd mask that out when it runs through the press. But again, this requires a little bit of just planning. So what I am going to be doing is I'm going to be laying out all these apples as I so wish them and cutting the masks now, so I'm all prepped. So, as I say, I have kind of thought about this-ish. I'm going to use the strong apples, so I'm just going to select a few of the stronger apples, that cloth one there, to sit at the front, and some of the sort of few funny blobby apples like that one, which might just ink up as a big black blob. We'll work with that at the back, so we'll kind of hide him a bit, but it will still add some shape and form. Now this cloth, everything's still got its gum on it, so the cloth is quite stiff, so I'm just going to have to work with it. So he's going to go at the back. Might use, that's going to be quite a dark shape, so I might actually come in with quite a textured shape somewhere in there. As I say, this is, there is an element of freeform, you have to go with the flow. I quite liked that grouping of 3 I had, so I'm going to emulate a similar one. I'm hoping this one, I'm going to try and print this one at the front. I don't know how these leaves are going to work on the cloth. This might just ink up as one big black leaf shape. If that does, I might not want that there, but I can work with that when it comes to it. And this is going to be a long, thin still life to stretch across the bottom of the paper. So I'm going to add a leaf in there. Like a giant jigsaw, it's rather fun. I'm going to add one of you guys behind there. I'm going to be positive this is going to ink up beautifully. The Mokulito I feel confident with, the cloth one is far more fickle. Let's have him rolling off the side there. Nice leaf there. I'm going to use this cloth a bit more and actually scrunch that one properly in it like that. A bit better. Oh, this is like an apple feast. Ooh. Got too many apples. How long is my piece of paper? Okay, we're at the edge of the paper. Let's have a stray apple sort of floating down here at the bottom of the paper with attached leaf. And let's have a fallen leaf somewhere also down here with it. And you can kind of tuck in there. Okay, so we're going to go with that, something like that. And this is where, what you could do is you could sketch this out. So you label everything, you sketch it, do a sketch, so you know your order of things. I am going to sort of take a visual memory of this. I'm going to now look at it and think, okay, we're printmaking. So instead of the ones that need to be printed first are the ones at the very back, the back layer. So that's this one here. These leaves, this one, those are the Mokulito ones. So we're working from the back forwards. So that's this guy here has got, and these masks, the masks I'm cutting are incredibly loose. You can obviously make them far more accurate. I am working with a very loose structure to get this done. So there's going to be a mask under there. Got a leaf shape. So what I'm doing is I'm just cutting out the masks for my back layer. The back layer of prints to prevent some of the ink transferring onto the surface. Now tissue paper sometimes, depending on your ink quality, your amount of ink you apply, the ink can seep through the tissue paper and cause a sort of speckly effect on your, that will do, on your paper. You shouldn't have a problem with lithographic inking because you're using such thin layers of ink that there shouldn't be any seepage through. If it is a problem, just use some thicker paper. And that's going to sit there. This is where they're irrelevant because they're going to be done separately, so I'm going to actually remove those right out of shot because that's just going to confuse me. So we're printing these 3 first, which are going to sit, yep. Then that's going to go on top. The cloth is going, okay. So you can see this does take a little bit of getting your head around it. But you've also got to just go with the flow. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it does work, then that's awesome. If some of the layers end up sort of showing through, it's part of printmaking, and embrace that. So printing that one first, that's then going to sit on top. My cloth, I don't mind if this cloth here, when I say the cloth I mean my picnic blanket, let's say, I'm thinking I don't mind if that appears transparent and I'm not masking off areas. That could be quite nice, almost like as a fine muslin picnic blanket, which doesn't exist. Not very many people have fine muslin picnic blankets, but I'm just trying to prevent so many masks going on, so you've got to be a bit flexible. So yeah, picnic, right, okay, got it. So take these away, they're going to sit on top there, and then we can move all that up here. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to have a sip of a coffee. It's funny, I'm actually not a big coffee drinker. I worked many years as a barista, and I was trained by a really exceptional barista in Spitalfields in London. And so I have a distinct pleasure in making coffee and less pleasure in drinking it. I'm more than happy to make coffee all day for people, and I take great pride in that, but drinking it is... I'm not much of a coffee drinker, but I've got one because I feel I should have one. Right, okay. We're there. Got this. I know exactly what I'm doing. First of all, oh dear, the hilarity of the situation. Right, I'm going to, I'm going to ink up the Mokulito first. Because the Mokulito can just sit there with ink on. So I'm just removing the gum. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm just thinking about what colour I want these leaves, because some of these are going to have a rollover. Which again, I can do that later down the line just before I'm printing. That's not essential to do straight up. I'm going to print all the Mokulito leaves the same base colour, because I feel that would add a bit of consistency. So let's get that out. Let's see. Ooh, got all my inks here. Let's see if there's any... I inherited a load of inks off a great friend of mine when they moved to another country, and they found a new path in life. And some of these inks are absolutely stunning. Some of them are a little bit gunky. That one is okay. This is a litho ink from Graphic Chemical. Quite an old one. But I'm going to actually, for the Mokulito and all of the cloth lithography, I'm going to add a drop of plate thinning oil. As if you can see that label. This one's actually is copper plate ink reducing oil. It's thin. You use it a lot in ink making as your main binder, but also helps thin out the ink. So what I've done off shot there is I've added 2 drops of the oil to an approximate 10p blob of ink. Basically you just want it for the Mokulito and the cloth. I found you needed a little bit looser than a standard lithographic ink. It just seems to help. So that's why I'm just adding a few drops of that. Just added a 3rd drop. And it's kind of just now becoming a sort of spreadable, glossy consistency. It's certainly not runny. You know, it's not dropping off the palette knife, blobs. It's literally just to kind of loosen it. There's, and it depends on the quality of your ink to start with. This was a very thick, stiff ink, so that's why I chose to add some. Okay. You do want a very thin layer for the, especially if you're used to relief printing, so lino and stuff like that. It is the layers needed for this. You'll think you've got no ink on there. That's why I did consider doing this whole thing as a live stream, which would have been fun, but I didn't have the guts. Because actually I have no children in the house today, which is novel hence why I'm able to film without interludes of a rather wonderful 6-year-old saying, what are you doing? But it allows me just to crack on. It's a rare occurrence actually when we electively homeschool our children, and that was before the C-19 outbreak. Right, so I'm just literally inking these up. You'll notice with the sort of small jigsaw elements, you get a nice edge to the jigsaw plate because you're working with quite small elements and small bits. It will pick up on that edge of the jigsaw element slightly, but that doesn't bother me. I quite like it. I have a history of jigsaw making in my family, toy makers and jigsaw makers. Very interesting family actually. Well, I think so. I think everyone thinks their family's interesting. They're probably really boring actually. I like to convince myself they're interesting. Okay, so they are inked up. So hold them in the light. They look good, so they can just sit there drying. Great. I'm actually going to ink up the... No, I'm not going to ink up the other leaves. I'm going to get some... Yeah, I am going to ink up the other Mokulito leaf, the third one, just so I know it's done, which is this one. Although I'm not printing it now, that means when it comes to it and comes to the printing, it's all done, which is always helpful, and you can just get on with the printing. Now it's difficult with the dark colours to note when your leaf is inked up, hence why I held it in the light to see if I could see a sheen of newly applied ink. See, the leaf is holding rather well, and as I say, this is the back of an old Mokulito plate. Technically speaking, apparently you can't use the back. It just seems such a waste. I can't stand the waste. The world is so wasteful as it is. We need to get better with resource management in this world, otherwise we are on the edge to extinction. Okay, that's just inked up, so I know that's inked up, so just mental note. There aren't any others, that one. Because I know all the leaves I want to be the same colour. Well, they're the sort of the Mokulito elements. I'm just going to ink them all up. This will be easier to see when I've applied the dark brown ink because it's working on the touche, which is sort of a golden brown. So I can already see it's getting a lot darker, so I know that's inking up really nicely. See, this Mokulito, these plates are performing rather well. It doesn't usually happen on a video when you're demonstrating. Usually everything in the world that can go wrong goes wrong. Not today. Oh, that was famous last words. I shouldn't have said that. So you can see very clearly that's gone a lot darker than sort of that was the original touche colour. And that's been inked up. So you can see that's really held some lovely... Just going to try and get that bit more there. Now you can, yes and no, so to speak, when you're sort of inking up a stone or zinc plate litho or something like that, you can ink it up dry so the whole area gets full up black with your ink colour, just to allow the ink to force itself into the grease marks, and then you wipe the whole thing down with a wet cloth, and that removes the ink in the non-grease areas. I just did a bit of that with this, so I had a very dry Mokulito plate, and I inked it up so it almost went all over dark brown, just to try and get some of the ink in this touche bit here, which wasn't picking it up very well. And then I squeezed it with a very wet wet sponge to remove that excess ink from the background, and then did a whip over to crispen it up. It sometimes works on Mokulito, sometimes the wood grain just takes up all the ink, so it doesn't really happen. Right, okay, let me just have a think. Yep, we have a plan. I'm just wondering if there are any more to ink up dark brown. Just tempted to ink up those apples dark brown. This one, you know when an apple, I'm going to do that one. I'm trying to get all my inking done, because then you can just have fun with the rollovers and it's more efficient. And I don't have all the space in the world to have all my colours out at the same time. So I've got to maximise space. So I'm trying to use this dark brown ink. Then I'll clear it up off camera, and then I can roll up the next ink. So I'm going to do this one, because you know when especially a brownie apple or a wild crab apple gets a bit bruised, it goes that lovely sort of dark brown. This is going to be a bruised apple, because I quite like these spots here. I'm thinking they're quite bruised-like. So this is going dark brown, this one. You can already see it's changing colour. It's obviously picking up the ink. And don't forget, heavy touche areas, heavy areas of grease will take a lot of ink. So, you know, recharge your roller if you need to, if you've got a lot of areas of darkness. So if you'd noticed that what I'd done there is it went quite dark all of a sudden, my plate, and then I squeezed quite a lot of water on it, and I wiped down and I did a quick roll over, and it's cleaned it up really nicely. But it allowed the ink to penetrate. I'll try and do another one if I keep working it. It allowed the ink to penetrate the parts it wasn't sitting in. Okay, I'm actually going to leave that, so I'll do it on a demonstration on another one. Yeah, so that one's inked. Oh, decisions. Inked, 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 ink. I'm going to do that green, and I'm going to do that one green. Okay. So next I'm going to ink up this cloth one, and that's going to be inked up dark brown as well. Just going to get a bit of water, wipe that gum off, and also hopefully the water will help stick the fabric to the surface of my plan chest, because it's going to be fiddly inking up these little pieces. Okay. Once I've inked this one, I'm going to pause the camera and I'm going to clean up this. I'm just recharging the roller, adding a tiny bit more brown. I'm going to pause the camera and we're going to split the film. I'm going to clean up the dark brown, ready for the next colour, which you'll see, and then we'll ink all the others. I think this is the only one I'm going to do in dark brown. I think, yeah. So then I need to clean up the actually taking rather nicely. You can see already the dark brown is going onto the grease areas, which is good. And all of these, because I'm using oil-based ink, the ones I've inked up can just sit there. They're not going to dry. The water's going to dry, but that's actually a good thing, because you don't necessarily want blobs of water being forced through, especially with a cloth, being forced through the printing press, because you'll end up with lovely wet patch on your paper unevenly, which will dry with the buckle. So actually the fact they're sitting there and just chilling out and drying, the water evaporating, doesn't matter. The ink is not going anywhere. There are no dries in this ink. Just straight up oil-based ink. So it is just hanging out, waiting for the next stage. A lot of them will be having rollovers over the top, which is something we've looked at in previous videos. You know, this cloth lithography just takes a little bit of working to get the ink in. Which is what I'm doing now. It is getting there. It's actually got some very nice reticulation mark. Reticulation is where the touche and the liquid, be it water or spirits that you've put it with, start sort of separating. They create almost like these, how would you say, almost tide marks. That's the word I was looking for. Very tide marks as it dries. Obviously on something like stone you can create some absolutely stunning effects because it's very sensitive to those delicate tide marks, and something like cloth you're working with the nature and the background of the cloth itself, so it's not as sensitive. But actually I've got a few there, which is fun. Okay, last one, and I'm going to leave great. So you can see it's gone a lot darker brown. It's picked up areas. So I'm going to leave that as is. Again, doesn't matter if it's just sitting there and just chilling out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the filming. I'm going to clean up the dark brown. That's the only bit I'm doing off camera. You really don't want to see that. And then we're ready to do the first batch of printing and get some colour out for the other inking up. Okay, so I'll be 5 minutes and then we'll restart.